The river had spoken, and for several long moments, Aisha could do nothing except stare. Moonlight shimmered across Oued Tislit. The current flowed as it always had. The valley remained silent. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had changed, because the voice had spoken her name, not shouted it, not whispered it, simply spoken it, as though it belonged there, as though the river had known it for years, as though the river had been waiting for her, waiting for this night, waiting for this moment. A cold shiver traveled through her body. Her feet remained planted against the damp earth. She wanted to move. She wanted to speak. She wanted to demand answers. Instead, she stood motionless, listening, watching, hoping the voice would return. It did not. The river flowed, the moon shone, the valley slept, and the silence became unbearable. Aisha. The memory of the voice echoed through her mind, again and again and again, until she could no longer bear standing there. At last she stepped backward. Then another step, then another, never taking her eyes from the water, as though something might emerge the instant she turned away. But nothing emerged, nothing moved, nothing followed. Eventually she turned and began walking toward the village. Her pace quickened, then quickened again. Before she realized it, she was nearly running, not because she was a coward, not because she wanted to escape, because she was human, and no human being spends 12 years searching for answers only to discover that the river itself might be answering back. That night, sleep refused to come. Aisha lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The darkness felt different. The silence felt different. Every creak of wood, every distant gust of wind, every sound carried a strange weight. Several times she closed her eyes. Several times she drifted toward sleep. Each time she saw the river, black water, silver moonlight, endless reflections, and beneath them all, something watching, not a face, not a creature, only a feeling. The certainty that something had noticed her, and once something notices you, can it ever truly stop? Hours passed. The village slept, and still she remained awake, listening, waiting, wondering whether the voice would somehow find her again. Just before dawn, she finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, and she dreamed. At first, the dream seemed ordinary. Mist covered the valley. The mountains stood beneath pale moonlight. The river wound through darkness. Then she saw a woman, far away, walking through shallow water, slowly, silently. The figure moved against the current. One step, then another, then another. Long dark hair, a familiar posture, a familiar silhouette. Aisha felt her heart tighten. Even inside the dream she knew. She knew before she saw the face. She knew before she spoke. She knew before reason could intervene. Her mother. "Mother!" The woman continued walking, unaffected, unhearing, as though the voice never reached her. Aisha tried to run. The distance never changed. She called again, and again, and again. Still the woman walked forward, toward darkness, toward deeper water, toward something hidden beyond sight. Then slowly, the woman stopped for the first time. She stood motionless. The river around her became perfectly still, and very slowly, she began turning. Not fully, not enough, only enough for Aisha to glimpse part of her face. Then the dream shattered. Aisha awoke with a gasp. Morning sunlight filtered through the window. Birds sang outside. The village was waking. For several moments she remained motionless, trying to steady her breathing, trying to separate dream from reality, trying to convince herself that none of it meant anything. Yet the feeling remained, the same feeling she had carried from the river, the feeling of being watched, the feeling of being expected, the feeling that something had begun, and whatever had begun would not stop simply because she wished it to. Outside, Oued Tislit appeared unchanged. Women carried water, children ran between houses. Smoke rose from ovens. Goats wandered narrow paths. Life continued exactly as it always had, but Aisha no longer felt entirely part of it. Every conversation seemed distant. Every laugh seemed muted. Every familiar face appeared strangely unreal, as though she stood behind an invisible wall while the rest of the world continued without her. Several times, she caught herself staring toward the valley, toward Oued Tislit, toward the place where the voice had spoken, and each time she looked away quickly, not wanting anyone to notice, not wanting anyone to guess what had happened, because she wasn't even sure she believed it herself. How could she tell another soul? How could she say, "The river spoke my name"? Who would believe her? Who could? That afternoon she crossed paths with Youssef. He immediately noticed something was wrong. "Didn't sleep?" Aisha forced a small smile. "Is it that obvious?" "It is when you've known someone your whole life." She looked away. Youssef studied her for a moment. Concern clouded his face. Not curiosity. Concern. The sort that comes from caring about someone. The sort that comes from seeing them drift somewhere you cannot follow. "You've been near the river too often." Aisha said nothing. "The valley has been strange lately." Still she remained silent. Youssef hesitated, then lowered his voice. "I've heard things." That made her look up. "What things?" He shrugged. "The kind people whisper." "About what?" "The river." A chill passed through her. "What do they say?" Youssef looked toward the distant valley, then back at her, and for the first time since they were children, he seemed uncertain. "That it's listening." That night, Aisha tried not to think about the river. She failed. Every task she attempted seemed unfinished. Every conversation drifted away from her. Every thought returned to the same place. Oued Tislit, the voice, the dream, and the impossible certainty that something had changed. After sunset, she sat outside her home watching darkness slowly descend upon the valley. The mountains became shadows, the shadows became darkness, and the darkness became a living thing. Silent, patient, watching, just like the river. Inside the house, Idris repaired an old lantern. His hands moved with practiced certainty, the same hands that had once searched the valley for his missing wife, the same hands that had carried Aisha when she was a child, the same hands that now seemed older every year. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was familiar, too familiar. At last, Idris looked up. "You've been quiet." Aisha forced a smile. "I've always been quiet." "No." His voice remained calm. "You've been somewhere else." Aisha lowered her eyes. That answer frightened her more than she expected, because it was true. Part of her was somewhere else. Part of her was still standing beside the river, still hearing her name, still listening, waiting. "You should sleep," Idris said. "You look tired." Aisha nodded, but she knew sleep would not come easily. Not tonight, perhaps not for many nights. The following morning began like every other, and yet it did not. The village appeared unchanged, but Aisha noticed things she had never noticed before. People lowered their voices when speaking near the river path. Old women stopped conversations when she approached. Children avoided certain trails after sunset. Had it always been this way? Or had she simply never paid attention? The question followed her throughout the day. Then, shortly after noon, something happened. A small thing, a meaningless thing, the sort of thing most people would forget immediately. Aisha was carrying water back toward the village when she saw a figure standing near the river. A woman, far away, motionless, watching. The distance made details impossible to see, yet something about her felt familiar. Aisha stopped walking. The woman remained still, neither approaching nor leaving, simply watching. A strange unease settled inside her. She set down the water jar, then began walking toward the figure. Slowly, carefully. The woman did not move. The distance closed. Aisha's heartbeat quickened. 20 paces, 15, 10. Then a flock of birds suddenly erupted from nearby reeds. Their wings exploded into the air. Aisha flinched, only for a second. When she looked again, the woman was gone. No footprints, no movement, no sound. Nothing, only the river, flowing quietly beneath the afternoon sun. That evening, she returned to the same place. She told herself she was only curious. She told herself she was only making certain. She told herself many things. None of them were true. The truth was simpler. She hoped the woman would return. She hoped the voice would return. She hoped the river would answer. Instead, she found only silence. Yet even silence now felt different, like a conversation interrupted, like words waiting to be spoken, like a door left slightly open. Days passed. The sightings continued, never close, always distant, always near water. A woman standing beside the river, a woman crossing the mist, a woman visible only for a moment, then gone. Aisha began questioning herself. Was she imagining it? Was grief finally catching up with her? Had 12 years of unanswered questions begun unraveling her mind? Sometimes she almost convinced herself. Then something would happen. Something impossible, and doubt would return. One evening, she saw the figure again, standing across the river, half hidden by mist. The setting sun painted the valley in gold. For several long moments, neither moved. Aisha stared. The woman stared back. Then slowly, very slowly, the figure raised a hand, not waving, not calling, simply raising it, as though recognizing her, as though waiting. Aisha felt a chill travel through her body, and before she could react, the mist shifted, the figure vanished. Again. That night she dreamed of water. Nothing else. Only water. Endless black water stretching beneath a moonless sky. No mountains, no stars, no horizon. Just darkness and water. Somewhere within that darkness she heard singing. The same melody, the same impossible song. Beautiful, ancient, heartbreaking. A song that seemed older than memory itself. A song carrying grief so deep it felt eternal. When she woke, tears covered her face, and she had no idea why. The next morning, for the first time in years, Aisha decided to visit Lala Zora. The old woman lived near the edge of the village, in a small stone house overlooking the valley. People often visited her, sometimes for advice, sometimes for stories, sometimes simply to listen, because Lala Zora remembered things others had forgotten, and sometimes that made people uncomfortable. Aisha found her sitting outside beneath the shade of an olive tree. The old woman smiled faintly when she approached. Aisha, Lala, you have questions? It was not a question. Aisha managed a small laugh. Is it that obvious? Lala Zora's eyes remained fixed upon her. No. A pause. Only to those who know how to look. For a moment, neither spoke. Then the old woman turned her gaze toward the distant valley, toward Oued Tislit, and for the briefest moment, the smile disappeared from her face. Lala Zora continued staring toward the valley, toward the river, toward something only she seemed able to see. The silence stretched. Then the old woman sighed. A tired sigh. The sort that comes from carrying memories for too many years. You've been going there. Again, it wasn't a question. Aisha remained still. Lala. The old woman looked at her, and suddenly Aisha felt like a child again. Not because of age, because of the way Lala Zora watched people, as though she could see the thoughts hidden behind their eyes. You've been going to Oued Tislit. Aisha hesitated, then nodded. The old woman closed her eyes. Only for a moment. But it was enough. Enough to tell Aisha she had said the wrong thing, or perhaps the right thing. Lala. Why are people afraid of the river? The old woman smiled sadly. People are afraid of many things. Not like this. No. Then tell me. Lala Zora looked away, toward the olive trees, toward the mountains, anywhere except the river. For a long moment she seemed to consider her answer. Then finally she spoke. When I was young, nobody needed warnings. Aisha frowned. What do you mean? The river warned people itself. A chill moved through her. What does that mean? But the old woman only shook her head. Some stories grow dangerous when spoken aloud. That answer stayed with Aisha long after she left. The river warned people itself. What did that even mean? A voice? A spirit? A legend? Or simply another old superstition? Reason told her not to take the word seriously. Reason told her grief was turning ordinary things into mysteries. Reason told her she was chasing shadows, yet reason had not heard the voice. Reason had not spoken her name, and reason had not stood beside Oued Tislit that night. As summer deepened, the valley grew hotter. Days stretched long. Dust drifted through village paths. The river became a place of relief, a place where children played, where women washed clothes, where shepherds watered their animals. Life continued, normal, ordinary. Yet Aisha could not shake the feeling that she was seeing only the surface of things, like someone staring at calm water while knowing something moves beneath. Sometimes she would stop in the middle of a conversation, certain she had heard singing, only to realize nobody else had reacted. Other times she would turn suddenly, convinced someone was watching her, only to find empty streets, empty fields, empty hills. And yet, the feeling never disappeared. One afternoon, she encountered Youssef again. He was repairing a broken fence near the edge of the village. The sun hung low above the mountains. The heat of the day was beginning to fade. Youssef looked up when he saw her approaching. You look worse. Aisha laughed despite herself. You're becoming very encouraging. I'm serious. I know. He set down his tools. For a moment, he studied her face. You haven't been sleeping. No. Bad dreams. Aisha froze. The reaction lasted less than a second, but Youssef noticed. He always noticed. Bad dreams. It wasn't a question. She looked away. I suppose. Youssef remained silent, then finally said, My grandmother used to say something. Aisha sighed. Another old story? Maybe. What did she say? Youssef glanced toward the valley, toward Oued Tislit, then lowered his voice. She said some places remember people. Aisha felt her heartbeat quicken. And sometimes those places don't like being forgotten. Neither spoke for several moments. The wind moved through the dry grass. A goat bleated somewhere in the distance. Life continued around them. Normal. Simple. Yet the conversation left a strange weight behind. Because lately everyone seemed to be speaking around the same thing, never directly, always indirectly, as though the entire village shared a secret, and nobody wished to be the first person to say it aloud. That evening, clouds gathered above the mountains. Dark clouds. Heavy clouds. The sort that promised rain. A rare thing during that season. Aisha sat beside her window, watching them arrive. Watching shadows spread across the valley. Watching Oued Tislit disappear into darkness. Then she heard it. The song. Not loudly, not clearly, barely more than a whisper. But it was there, the same melody, the same impossible sadness, the same voice without words. Aisha stood immediately. Her heart hammered inside her chest. The song drifted across the valley, faint, distant, calling. She knew she should stay home. She knew she should ignore it. She knew every sensible thing she ought to do. Instead, she grabbed her cloak and stepped outside, because somewhere deep inside her, she already knew. The river was calling again, and this time, it wanted her to follow. The first drops of rain began falling as she descended toward Oued Tislit. The valley seemed different beneath the storm clouds, older, darker, almost unfamiliar. The song continued, appearing, disappearing, leading her farther downstream than she had ever gone before. Past familiar paths, past grazing fields, past places she knew, into quieter lands, forgotten lands, places where even the birds seemed reluctant to sing. And all the while, the melody continued, waiting, guiding, drawing her onward, towards something hidden beyond the bend of the river, towards something that had been waiting much longer than she realized. The rain intensified. Not a storm. Not yet. Just a steady curtain of water falling from the darkening sky. Aisha pulled her cloak tighter around her shoulders and continued forward. The song remained ahead. Always ahead. Never closer. Never farther. Like a memory she could almost touch. Like a dream refusing to end. The farther she traveled, the less familiar the valley became. The paths narrowed. The trees grew older. Twisted olive trees emerged from the darkness like silent guardians. Their branches reached across the trail. Their shadows seemed almost human beneath the rain. Aisha had never been this far downstream. Or perhaps she had. Long ago, before her mother's disappearance, before grief divided her life into two halves, before every path became a reminder of something missing. The melody drifted across the water once more, clearer now, beautiful, ancient, and profoundly sad. Aisha stopped walking, listening. The song seemed to rise from the river itself, not from a singer, not from a person, from the water, as though Oued Tislit remembered a sorrow too old for words. Then suddenly, the melody stopped. The silence that followed felt unnatural. The rain continued. The river flowed, yet the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting, watching. Aisha felt the hairs rise on the back of her neck. Someone was there. She was certain of it. Someone stood nearby, just beyond sight. She turned slowly. The riverbank was empty. The trees were empty. The mist drifting above the water revealed nothing. Still, the feeling remained, strong enough to make her heart pound, strong enough to make her question whether she was truly alone. Then she saw her, across the river, a woman, standing perfectly still, closer than ever before. For a moment, Aisha forgot to breathe. The distance was shorter this time, short enough to see details. Long dark hair, a pale dress moving gently in the rain, bare feet standing at the water's edge. The woman did not move, did not speak, did not blink. She simply watched. Aisha took one cautious step forward. The woman remained motionless. Another step, still nothing, then a third, and suddenly the figure turned, not quickly, not fearfully, calmly, as though she had expected Aisha to follow. Then she began walking, away from the river, into the darkness. Aisha's heart raced. "Wait!" The woman did not stop. Aisha crossed the muddy ground as quickly as she could. Branches scraped against her cloak. Wet grass clung to her boots. For several moments she caught glimpses of the figure between trees, always just ahead, always disappearing before she could reach her. The chase continued deeper into the valley, farther from the village, farther from safety, farther than she should have gone. Yet she could not stop, because every instinct told her the woman knew something, something important, something connected to the voice, something connected to her mother. Then, suddenly, the figure vanished. Completely. Aisha stopped, breathing heavily, Rain dripped from her hair. Water ran down her face. The forest around her stood silent. No footsteps. No movement. No sign that anyone had ever been there. Only darkness and the distant sound of the river. Aisha turned slowly in every direction. Nothing. The woman had disappeared again, as though she had never existed, as though the valley itself had swallowed her. For several moments, she stood alone. Then she noticed something strange. The rain no longer seemed as loud. The river no longer seemed as distant. In fact, the river sounded very close, too close. Aisha frowned. She followed the sound. Only a few steps, then a few more. The trees parted, and suddenly she found herself standing before a place she had never seen before. A small inlet hidden by stone and vegetation, almost invisible from the main river. A pocket of still water connected to Oued Tislit by a narrow channel. The surface was perfectly calm, perfectly black. Even the falling rain seemed unable to disturb it. Aisha stared. The sight unsettled her immediately. Every other part of the river moved, flowed, lived. This water did not. It waited, silent, motionless, watching, just like the voice. Without realizing it, she stepped closer. The strange pool reflected the dark sky above. Yet something felt wrong about the reflection. The clouds moved overhead, but not below. The rain fell from the sky, but not upon the water. The reflection remained still, unnaturally still. Aisha felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Then, for the briefest moment, she thought she saw movement beneath the surface. Not a fish, not a branch. Something larger, something human. A shape moving through impossible depths. The image lasted less than a heartbeat, then vanished, leaving only darkness behind. Aisha stumbled backward. Her pulse thundered inside her ears, and for the first time since this began, fear overcame curiosity. Real fear, the kind that tells a person to leave immediately, the kind that exists to keep people alive. So she turned, and she ran. Back toward the village, back toward familiar paths, back toward lantern light and human voices, back toward the world she understood. Yet even as she fled through the rain, one thought remained trapped inside her mind. The woman had led her there, not by accident, not by chance. The woman wanted her to find that place. The question was, why? Far behind her, hidden among the trees, something watched her leave and did not follow. Aisha did not tell anyone about the hidden pool. Not Youssef, not Si Idris, not Lala Zora. No one. Some secrets felt fragile, as though speaking them aloud might make them disappear, or worse, make them real. So she carried the knowledge alone. The memory of the black water followed her everywhere, during meals, during conversations, even during sleep. Whenever she closed her eyes, she saw that motionless surface, that impossible reflection, that fleeting shape beneath the depths, waiting, watching, remembering. The following days brought no answers, only more questions. The woman did not appear. The singing did not return. Even the river seemed ordinary again. Had she imagined everything? The thought returned often. Perhaps exhaustion had finally caught her. Perhaps grief had twisted her perception. Perhaps she was chasing ghosts because she could not accept the past. The explanations sounded reasonable, comforting, safe. Yet every time she almost believed them, something happened, something small, something impossible, enough to keep doubt alive. 3 days after discovering the hidden pool, Aisha awoke before sunrise. The village remained asleep. The world outside her window was still blue with early dawn. For a few moments she lay quietly, listening. Then she heard it. Water, not the distant sound of the river. Closer, Much closer, a slow dripping sound. Inside the house. Aisha sat upright. The sound continued. Drip, drip, drip. She rose from bed. The floorboards creaked beneath her feet. The house remained silent. Everyone else slept. The dripping continued. She followed it. Across the room, toward the far corner, toward an old wooden chest that had belonged to her mother. The sound stopped. Instantly. Aisha froze. The silence that followed felt unnatural. She stared at the chest. Nothing moved. Nothing happened. Eventually she laughed at herself, a nervous laugh, then returned to bed. Yet sleep never came, because all morning she could not stop thinking about the sound and why it seemed to come from her mother's chest. That afternoon, clouds gathered once again above the valley. The air felt heavy, the sort of weather that makes animals restless, and people uneasy. Even Youssef seemed distracted. Aisha found him repairing fishing nets beside a small stream. Normally he greeted her with a smile. Today he looked troubled. What happened? Youssef glanced around before answering. Aslan's sheep disappeared. Aisha frowned. All of them. 6. That happens. Not like this. His expression darkened. There were no tracks. Aisha felt a strange chill. No tracks? Nothing. He lowered his voice. They vanished near the river. The words lingered between them. Neither spoke for several moments, because in villages like Oued Tislit, livestock did not simply disappear. Not without traces, not without signs, not without explanations. Yet explanations seemed increasingly rare these days. That evening, Aisha visited Lala Zora once more. The old woman seemed unsurprised, as though she had expected her return. You found something. Again. Not a question. Aisha sat beside her. For a long moment she remained silent, then finally asked, What is hidden along the river? Lala Zora's expression changed, only slightly, but enough. Enough for Aisha to know she had touched something important. The old woman looked toward the valley, toward Oued Tislit, then spoke softly. When I was a girl, people respected the river. People still do? No. Lala Zora shook her head. They fear it. A pause. That is not the same thing. Aisha waited. The old woman continued. There are places in this world where the distance between things becomes thin. What things? Lala Zora smiled sadly. The living and the dead. Aisha's breath caught. The old woman immediately looked away, as though she regretted saying even that much. Forget I spoke. Lala, forget it. The firmness in her voice ended the conversation. That night the storm finally arrived. Rain hammered rooftops. Wind moved through the valley like a living creature. Lanterns flickered behind windows. Families stayed indoors. The entire village seemed to shrink beneath the weather. Aisha sat awake long after midnight, listening, waiting, watching rain slide across the glass. Then suddenly, the singing returned, stronger than before, not outside, inside her mind. The same melody, the same sorrow, the same impossible beauty. Aisha stood immediately. Her pulse quickened. The song continued, calling, drawing, inviting, and for the first time, she understood something. The song was not trying to frighten her. It wanted her to follow. The realization should have terrified her. Instead, it filled her with an overwhelming sense of certainty, as though she had been walking toward this moment her entire life. Without hesitation, she wrapped herself in her cloak, opened the door, and stepped into the storm. The village lay buried beneath rain and darkness. No lights, no voices, no movement. Only the wind, only the river, only the song, waiting. Somewhere ahead, near Oued Tislit, near the hidden waters, near the truth, and far beyond the village. Something heard her coming and waited. The storm swallowed the valley. Rain poured from the heavens. Wind rushed between hills and olive groves. Branches groaned. Doors rattled. Lanterns flickered behind shuttered windows. And through it all, the song continued. Aisha followed. Not quickly, not recklessly, but with a certainty she could not explain. The melody drifted through darkness like a thread, and somehow she always knew where to find it. Oued Tislit appeared before her once again, black beneath the storm, ancient beneath the night. The river seemed larger than she remembered, wider, deeper, alive. Lightning flashed across the distant mountains. For an instant, silver light illuminated the valley. Then darkness returned. The song ended, abruptly, completely. Aisha stopped. The silence that followed felt enormous. Only rain remained, only the river, only the beating of her own heart. She stood upon the riverbank, waiting, listening. The storm pressed around her. Cold water ran from her cloak. The current moved past her feet, and for several long moments, nothing happened. A small part of her wondered whether she had finally lost herself, whether grief had become obsession, whether obsession had become madness. Perhaps there was no voice. Perhaps there was no woman. Perhaps there was no mystery. Perhaps... Aisha. The voice emerged from the darkness, closer, far closer than before, not from beneath the entire river, from somewhere directly ahead, somewhere near. The sound sent a chill through her body, yet this time she did not run. Fear remained, but curiosity had become stronger. For 12 years she had searched for answers. Now answers stood within reach, or so she hoped. "Who are you?" Her voice trembled. The river answered only with silence. Aisha stepped closer. Rain struck the water around her. The current continued flowing. Nothing appeared. Nothing moved. Then the voice returned. Soft, calm, almost gentle. "Aisha," she swallowed. "How do you know my name?" Silence. The question vanished into darkness. For a moment she thought the voice would not answer again. Then the river spoke, and the words changed everything. "Do you still search for her?" Aisha froze. The world disappeared. The storm disappeared. The river disappeared. Only those words remained. "Do you still search for her?" Her. Not them. Not someone. Her. The voice knew. It knew exactly who occupied her thoughts, exactly who haunted her dreams, exactly who had vanished 12 years ago. Her mother. Aisha's breath caught in her throat. The rain continued falling, but she barely noticed. "Who are you?" she whispered again. No answer. "Tell me where she is." Nothing. The river flowed. The darkness watched. The storm listened. Yet the voice remained silent. Aisha felt panic rising inside her. For years she had prayed for something, anything, a clue, a sign, a single answer. Now something had finally spoken, and it refused to explain itself. "Please." The word escaped before she realized it. Not a demand, not a challenge, a plea. The sort of plea a child makes after carrying grief for too long. "If you know something." The darkness remained unchanged. "If you know where she is." Still nothing. Tears mixed with rain upon her face. "If you know what happened." The river seemed to pause. Not literally, not physically, yet something shifted, something ancient, something listening. Then the voice, spoke one final time, not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, as though speaking a simple truth, a truth too old to change. A river remembers. Aisha stared into the darkness. The words echoed inside her mind. A river remembers. Before she could speak again, lightning split the sky. A brilliant flash illuminated the valley. For a single instant, the river shone silver, and standing in the water several paces away was a woman, motionless, watching, long dark hair, pale face, ancient eyes, a figure neither fully present nor fully absent, a figure that seemed to belong to the river itself. Aisha's heart stopped. The lightning vanished, darkness returned, and the woman was gone. Only silence remained. The song had disappeared. The voice had disappeared. The storm had begun to weaken, slowly, gradually, as though the night itself were ending. Aisha stood alone upon the riverbank, trembling, drenched, changed, because one truth had become impossible to deny. Something lived within Oued Tislit, something that knew her, something that knew about her mother, and somewhere within the darkness of the valley, the first thread of a much older mystery had begun to unravel. Far downstream, beyond the hidden pool, beyond the reach of ordinary eyes, something stirred beneath the black waters, something ancient, something patient, something that had waited many years for Aisha to return. And now, it knew she was listening.